Hello, Felix here again. It's good to be back with you. Remember I told you about Eli and the stories he told us? They were very good stories, but they were stories. About 2 years later, after the last time we actually saw Eli, although we had heard about him, had bad injury and everything, how he became a shepherd, well, about 2 years later, things started to get a little bit weird. No, I've got to say that. They did start to get a little bit weird. And it all started when some of our Germanian compatriots had been up in the hill country, round Jerusalem, but far enough away. The hill country is a strange place at the best of times. Reminds me a little bit of home, except it's a lot drier. But our friends from Germania, they weren't overstruck on that. Yes, there were some Germanians from hill country, but mainly they were forest folk. Oh, they had lots of different superstitions. They were quite different from us, really, although in some way very much alike, especially with their relationship with Rome. We got on really well. In fact, we did with the Thracians as well. But the Germanians, yes, we got on very well with them. As I say, they had lots of strange superstitions and, well, I suppose to us they were easily scared. Now we have gods. We have gods up in the mountains, we have gods in the streams, we have gods in our forests, but nothing like the gods and spirits and sprites and whatever they have in the Germanian forests as far as we've heard. No, they've got some very evil things going on there. Well, according to them. And I suppose from their attitude and from their reaction to certain things, they probably do believe that they're not far away from, well, very disturbing circumstances, to put it mildly. Well, Herod had sent them up into the hill country, just to have a look around, just a usual patrol through. And they came back rather, well, some of them looked scared. One night, when we were around in our, well, we call it barracks. It's not exactly barracks, a lot of tents outside the walls, but we got talking to some of the Germanians. We actually asked them, what exactly happened? What scared you so much? They wouldn't say a word. Now, that was unusual. Usually they came back full of their stories about what had happened. Maybe they had fights and stuff like that. Maybe they heard some good gossip. But no, nobody would talk. They just gave us a strange look. Our officers were also concerned. Now, our officers, of course, were Roman officers, although technically they were working for Herod. And when we expressed our concerns about the Germanians, our officers went to see their officers to see what was going on. Even their officers were a little bit, well, should I say, not exactly communicative, but did admit that some of their men had had quite a shock and quite a scare. Now, we've seen them fighting. They're wonderful in fights. But we have heard their superstitions, and we know they get scared, well, of things that they just don't trust. So what was it all about? Well, gradually our officers managed to get the story out, and they told us. Now that's good, we've got a very good relationship with our officers. Well, I suppose we're all in it together. Out here, working for Herod. Yes, sort of. The story they told us was, well, it sounded very much like one of Eli's stories, except that it had actually happened to a place we knew and at a time we knew, sort of a few months ago. Apparently, the Germanians had gone up into the hills and they'd met quite a few people who were agitated, to say the least, and some who were very excited. And when they finally got it out of the local population exactly what was going on, what a story it was. Apparently, there was an old man, and he had a wife called Elizabeth. Now, this old man, he was a priest. I've forgotten his name now. I suppose in one way it doesn't really matter. It was some strange Jewish name. Remember his wife, though. Remember his wife because of what happened. It'll probably come back to me later, the name of the man. His wife couldn't have children, and as I say, they were old, but he was a priest. And one day, apparently, he'd been in the temple with the division of priests, and they were doing their usual jobs, and he was drawn by lots to go behind what they called something like Holy of Holies or something like that. And he went behind there to light the incense. It was very special. They believed that their God was there, and only one person could go in at a time to light the incense as an act of worship. Now, this old priest went in. What happened inside, nobody was quite sure, but it came out a bit later. What people knew for a fact was, though, he came out looking very, very strange indeed, and he totally lost his voice. He couldn't say a thing. They tried to get him to talk. They tried to get him to say or show what had actually happened. But no. He actually said then that he had had a vision. And he told some of the priests, and he told his wife exactly what the vision was, that she actually was going to become pregnant. Even though she couldn't have children, even though she was old, she was going to become pregnant. A sort of a miracle. And she was going to become pregnant by, well, who knows? Not him. When I heard this, I thought, hello, it's one of Eli's stories. But it's happening these days? No, I wasn't really sure about that. At any rate, the story went on. This old priest, whatever his name is, he managed to write down that when he'd been inside the curtain, inside the Holy of Holies, where he was going to light the incense, suddenly, at the side of the altar, an angel appeared. And the angel told him that he was going to have this son, that his wife was going to become pregnant, but this son was a special one. He was the one that was going to be the forerunner of the one who'd been promised from their God. Now, immediately I heard that, I went straight back to the Elijah story that Eli had told us. Well, not exactly to the Elijah story, but to the Isaiah story, which he tried to tell us beforehand, but of course we hadn't been interested because there wasn't much action. And I thought, I've heard about this forerunner, I've heard about this special person coming. Messiah, that was it, Messiah. Oh, I got very interested. In fact, a couple of my friends who'd been around that campfire with Eli looked at me and said, oh. Our officers looked at us rather strangely. Do you know about this? No, we don't know about this, but we've heard stories from way, way, way back. Our officer looked at us. This apparently isn't a story. The Germanians were rather scared, apparently, when they'd heard an angel had come. Angel, something different, something that you couldn't really put your finger on. Well, apparently, this angel had told Zechariah, that's his name. I knew it was a strange name. Thinking of Isaiah had reminded me. Anyway, this angel had told Zechariah, his name was Gabriel, this angel was, had told him that they had to call this lad, when he was born, John. Not Zechariah, like it was normal for the Jews, calling the firstborn son after the father, but John. So that's what scared the Germanians, was it? Well, said our officer, what scared our Germanians was the thought of being up there where there were, well, as they put it, spirits flying around. And also, they'd seen this Zechariah, and yes, it was true, he could not speak. In fact, their officers tried to interrogate him, thinking there was something really strange going on. Well, we need to know what's going on. We need to know what's going on, because Herod would have asked us, they said. But apparently this Zechariah couldn't say a word. And he'd written down the whole story all over again. And that is what had really frightened some of the Germanians. Frightened them so much that at night they lit more campfires than they needed. Frightened them so much that they could not wait to get back here. Frightened them so much that actually some of them had said they were never going to go up there again. And we thought, well, that's a good story. But it never struck us that if the Germanians had refused to go up there again, the Thracians were down on the Egyptian border. Who was going to go up and do the patrol in the hill country? Us, of course. So we set off. A fortnight later, up into the hill country. Now, I'm not a superstitious man. I believe in the gods, all right. I believe gods at work, But there are sometimes, I must admit, sometimes on the mountains back home where I'd take one path instead of another, even if the other path was shorter, just in case, because I'd heard stories. And I think quite a few of us were like that. We'd heard stories and angels, and actually some of our campfires were a bit larger than normal, and then it happened. We arrived at the place where this old priest, Zechariah, and his wife Elizabeth lived, and she was pregnant. Very, very heavily pregnant. In fact, she was just about to give birth. Now, our officers said to us, keep a watch on the crowds, because crowds were gathering because the story had spread. Of course the story had spread. There were people coming from all over the place to see what was going on. Zechariah, well, we saw him, couldn't say a word. We tried to just be friendly, so, morning, or something like that, but he just looked at us and it was true. One of my friends said, why don't we go and prod him with a sword or something? Stick a spear close to him, see if he reacts. No, we said, no, I don't think that's right. I think our officers would not be very happy with that. Our officers wouldn't have been very happy with that. They were more concerned about all the crowds that were coming. Because this Elizabeth was so close to giving birth, they wanted to see what happened afterwards. Well, the day came, she gave birth. We were crowd controlled, to put it mildly. There were hundreds of people, not too close, but close enough. The baby was born. The usual crying, screaming, yelling baby. Then the other priests went in. What are you going to call him then? They said. What are you going to call him? We could hear that. We could understand by now. We'd lived here so long, we knew exactly what was going on, and we had our interpreter with us. Apparently, she turned round and said, we're going to call him John. Well, a big argument started then. Some of the family, some of her family, some of her relatives, some of his relatives, saying, you can't call him John, you can't call him John. He was calling Zechariah after his dad. Poor woman, she was getting it from every angle. And some of the crowd was getting very restless. In fact, our officer said, be on your guard. This is an opportunity for something bad to happen. And then something did happen. But it wasn't bad. All right. Maybe I have heard too many of Eli's stories. But I guess it was a sort of miracle. Zechariah takes out a writing tablet and writes on it and holds it up. What's he saying? What's he saying? What's he written down? What's he written down? The crowd were looking. The priest who'd taken it from him said, Really? Zachariah was nodding. What's he written, Neil said. And the priest ran out. His name is John. Very big writing. At that moment, Zechariah opened his mouth. Yes, he said, his name is John. Well, the crowd went, well, have you ever had that sort of tingling up the back of your neck? I had it, and I know some of my friends had it too. His name is John. And, said Zechariah, and told the whole story that we'd heard back in Jerusalem from the Germanians. The fact that the angel had come, because this was the first time he'd actually been able to say it, the angel had come, what the angel had said, what John's task was going to be. People were amazed. This is the forerunner, you could hear him saying. What's all the excitement, we said to our interpreter. What's all the excitement? Our interpreter looked. It's nothing really for you to worry about. Nothing for Harry to worry about. I looked at him. It's the forerunner, isn't it? I said, how do you know that? We've heard the story. We've heard the story of Isaiah. I sort of lied. You've heard the story of Isaiah? I said. Yeah, we have. Yes, said some of my friends. We heard it round a campfire on the road to Jericho. We didn't tell him. We didn't want to hear the whole story because it sounded very boring. But now all of a sudden it wasn't boring. Now all of a sudden, stories becoming real. As I said, things started to get very, very weird.